We're going to start the discussion now. Please put your hand in the air before you speak. And come in with any questions, interventions, contributions.
Or disagreements.
Do you think the polls are accurate for Podemos?
No.
No? You think?
I think that probably the polls underestimate the strength of Podemos for the following reason, because usually what happens is that the polls ask people who they're going to vote for, and then they ask them who they voted for in the previous election, and on the basis of this they calculate what is the estimate projection for what the vote is going to be like. But the problem is that Podemos hasn't existed before. There's been no general election in which Podemos has stood. So the translation from the direct voting intention into the projected vote is very random in the case of Podemos. You can more or less calculate that there's a certain amount of people who will vote for the Popular Party, but they're ashamed of saying that they will vote for the Popular Party or something like this. There's hidden vote. But if you actually look at the direct voting intention, the advantage for Podemos is higher. Now that doesn't mean that the results that the polls are giving now, necessarily what's going to happen at the time of the elections. There's still some time for the elections. There's going to be municipal and regional elections in May. There's going to be some other elections in September, and then the general election has not even been called. Many things can happen. I don't know. I mean, they might find that one of the leaders of Podemos is, eats children for breakfast, and this will damage. They will find out that surely. And this might damage the electoral prospects. The leaders of Podemos are also on a course of moderating the discourse, the way they speak, the things that they say, trying to appeal to more people, which I think is a wrong approach. But this might or might not have an impact on the voting intentions. Many things can happen between now and, but the general tendency is towards in that direction, I would say.
Do you think there's a chance with the kind of backtrack on policy so far in Syriza and this inability to actually carry out the anti-austerity policies that they want, that can actually have a negative impact on this anti-austerity campaign across Europe, and say Podemos will suffer because people will look to Syriza and say, well, actually it hasn't worked, they haven't managed it, and what there is to combat that?
Yes, I think that's quite possible. And I think that the Spanish capitalists are banking on that. They think that the longer they delay the general election, the better for them, because the government in Greece will be exposed as unable to solve the problems. And this is quite, it's possible that this will be the case. In fact, some of the leaders of Podemos have started distancing themselves from Greece, in the sense that they say, yes, we support Syriza, it's very good that they won the election, but Greece is not Spain, and Spain is a much stronger economy, and they say is in a better position to negotiate with Europe because we're more important in economic terms. This is true, but it doesn't mean that Spain can negotiate with a change in policy that Greece cannot negotiate. I think that's utopian. But yes, if Syriza is defeated, and this is quite likely, because they cannot carry out this program and at the same time reach an agreement with the Troika. If the whole thing collapses, this will have a negative effect in Spain. And many people will think, well, it's not possible. But then it will also have a positive effect for a smaller minority of people that will start to think, well, if that is not the way, what is the way? Should we not basically repudiate the debt? And is the conclusion of this that we cannot do this within the limits of capitalism, and therefore look for a more radical alternative? But I mean, that's a bit difficult to say.
Do you want to you answer in the end some of the things best?
Sure.
How do you explain that in some countries, it's like in Spain or Greece, it's left parties who are growing up, and in some countries like France or England, it's the extreme right?
You're French, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to make a point, which is basically that links with what Jordi was saying about changing the consciousness, and I think there were talks about the fact that our generation is going to be the one that going to have, in terms of living condition, we not going to improve our living condition if we compare them with our parents, basically. So, and I think we still have to see the kind of results of that sort of change in living standards and how that is going to impact the consciousness of the people, because, you know, until you're kind of at university, it's still a kind of a nice environment, but then once you get out there and you actually start, for example, looking for a job, but even at university with higher fees and higher living expenses, I think people are starting to, you know, change their mind about whether capitalism is actually providing us with what we need. And the other thing is, in reply a little bit to what you said, and I think it depends on the alternative that is there available. And for example, I think in France, Le Pen is offering, like, I am against the establishment, I am the alternative here, I oppose the parties that have been implementing austerity, so I think that's why they come across as likable.
Yeah,
well, that's why people vote.
It exists like other alternatives than the extreme left, and nobody looks at them. Because
I think Le Pen has watered down a lot her kind of racist, not kind of, but she has watered down all the extreme right since she has been gaining popularity. I think that might be one point, so they don't see her as, as extreme right wing. I don't think people that vote Le Pen see themselves as racist necessarily, but they see themselves as anti-establishment. So, but it's a simplistic kind of answer.
Too much thinking, huh?
Thinking is never a bad idea. Maybe I can answer this. This is an interesting point. First of all, I don't necessarily think the type of electorate that Podemos and Syriza are attracting is the same type of electorate that UKIP and National Front are attracting, although there might be some overlap. But I say the following: each country obviously develops in a different way through the experience with different parties, different governments, different mass movements, and so on. And in the case of France, you had about 3 or 4 years ago, was it, the beginning of a development of a big movement to the left, when Mélenchon left the Socialist Party, joined forces with the Communist Party, and created the Front de Gauche, the Left Front. And in his electoral campaign, what year was that? Was it 2010 or 2012? 12. He had huge rallies. He had like 100,000 people, 200,000 people, big rallies in Marseille, in Paris, in Toulouse, and all the big cities. And I would say that kind of represented the same mood. And it was happening at the same time as the Indignados movement in Spain and so on. And people wanted radical change. And Mélenchon, within the traditions of the French left, which are a bit peculiar, but he was talking about the revolution. Yes, he said it's a citizens' revolution, and we want a sixth republic. So he was kind of crystallizing or expressing this desire for fundamental change, for big change, for something, for change with everything that existed up until that time. And if you notice, this is something that the Communist Party had not been able to do in the previous elections. But then what happened? The left front obviously became quite strong, but at the same time Hollande was standing in the election, the Socialist Party candidate, on the basis of a different policy as well. He said, we're going to implement policy of growth, not austerity. I'm not like Merkel, there's another Europe, we're going to hire, I don't know, we said 200,000 teachers or 100,000 teachers, we're going to stop austerity, we're going to tax the rich and all that. And so he got a bigger share of votes. Also, quite a lot of people voted for him, voted for some sort of change. And so the left front was a bit squeezed in the last, in the actual vote. They grew in relation to what the Communist Party had polled in the previous election, significantly. And they had mobilized hundreds of thousands of people throughout the country who wanted to be part of a movement or something. Then what happened that the Hollande government, the Socialist Party government, started implementing its program, or attempting to implement this program, and this is interesting. They started taxing the rich, and what did the rich do? They left the country. They went to Luxembourg or Brussels or Russia or somewhere else where taxes were lower. So this also kind of proves that the policy of taxing the rich is positive. We should obviously support taxing the rich more than the workers. But it doesn't really work in a capitalist world, does it? And second, he was immediately, by the economic situation, the pressure of capitalism, to backtrack on all its promises and implement a package of austerity measures, right? And then municipal elections come in France. And what happened? Did the left front stand as a united alternative to austerity policies? No. The left front fractured. The Communist Party stood in joint lists with the Socialist Party in big cities like in Paris and in other places, i.e. a party that was in government carrying out austerity policies. And not only that, but also Mélenchon, the left party, stood in alliance with the Greens, which was a party that was part of the Socialist Party government carrying out austerity policies in other cities. So that kind of destroyed them, not completely, but it took quite a lot of wind from the sails. And in these conditions, an alternative to the left of social democracy didn't develop in any significant way. It's not ruled out that this will happen next. I mean, Mélenchon is now talking about creating a movement for the Sixth Republic. We'll see whether that develops or not. But it is in that context that the National Front has grown. But I will say that the National Front has not necessarily grown much beyond what was the historical high points when they stood against Chirac in the second round of the presidential election and so on. And you see that even in a country like Greece, you have also seen the rise of far-right parties. First it was Laos, and then the Golden Dawn, which is even more extreme. This is a party which is openly Nazi in its core, that has links with the state apparatus. It is a party of criminals and killers who used physical violence against the workers' movement and the youth, and a party that most of its leaders are in jail pending trial, and they still get what was it? 8 or 7% of the vote in the last election. 100,000 people voted for them. So I mean, even in a country like Greece, there's a polarization in society. Well, what is clear is that the middle ground alternatives have completely failed, and people are looking for more extreme polarizing to the right and to the left. Obviously, I would say that the people who polarize to the right, not necessarily the same type of people who polarize to the right and to the left. It's different types of people. But this is happening. Then I will say UKIP. But even Golden Dawn is a particularly peculiar thing, because I will say that while this is a Nazi party, it wouldn't be correct to say that all the people who vote for Golden Dawn are Nazis in the sense that they prepare to come out on the streets and beat up the trade unionists and left-wing people and destroy the organizations. As a matter of fact, when Golden Dawn has tried to mobilize, they have mobilized very few numbers. There is a core of active fascists in that party, but there's a lot of people who vote for them as a protest vote. Protest vote for a Nazi party. There's a particular type of protest vote. But they won't necessarily come out at this time in the streets to destroy the left, for instance. And when asked, Golden Dawn voters, when they were asked if your party wasn't standing, which party would you vote? The big percentage of them said that they would vote for Syriza. So with a serious policy, serious revolutionary policy on the part of the left, you could even win some, not all, but section of those people voting for that. Then in relation to UKIP in Britain, I would say the following. In Britain there is also a situation which is similar to it, but at a different degree than the situation in these two countries. There is a big discontent with the policies of the conservative liberal coalition, but also with the non-policies of the Labour Party. I mean, how come you have people are sick and tired of austerity, and then you have the leader of the opposition party coming out saying, we're gonna keep Tory spending cuts. We're gonna be responsible, fiscally responsible. How is this going to infuse anybody to vote for the Labour Party? So it's not surprised the Labour Party is not ahead in the polls at a time when they should be massively defeating the coalition. And whenever voters have been given an option which is different from all the establishment parties, even in Britain, they have voted for that. For instance, when was it? I can't remember the exact year, but it must have been about 2 years ago, or a year and a half, or 2 years, 3 years ago, when George Galloway stood in Bradford, was it Bradford West or Bradford East? He got more votes than the three main parties combined. Now, I'm not particularly a fan of George Galloway, but the people who voted for George Galloway the way he presented himself is as a genuine social democratic alternative, a left alternative to the existing policies. And people voted for him, and also because of his opposition to the war in Iraq. And then in the Scottish referendum, you had the three main parties advocating the same policies, austerity, 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 standing on one side, and then people voting against that on the other side, and they nearly won that referendum, despite the fact that all the main Lib Dems, Conservatives and Labour, they went there and they said, no, this is we must maintain the union, better together and all that stuff. People voted against. They didn't necessarily vote for independence, but because they thought that they were voting against the establishment, they were voting against Trident, they were voting for the NHS, they were voting against austerity policies, they were voting, we don't want a Tory government anymore that we haven't voted for. That is an expression of that discontent. So my argument is that when this discontent is given a channel of expression, it will express. If it has no channel of expression, you will not see it. And you might get the wrong idea that people are polarizing to the right, when the truth is that there is a section of people polarizing to the right, but there's another section of people polarizing to the left, who is searching for an alternative on the other side of the spectrum. Or you take the Italian elections, or you take any European country, you will see, first of all, phenomenon of massive abstention, record historical high levels of abstention. People who don't feel identified with any parties. But then the rise of left parties in Holland, in Denmark, and in other places like this. There was an opinion poll 2 weeks ago that said that 25% of the people in Austria, which is a country where there's full employment, the economic crisis hasn't affected very much, although it has affected, but I mean, it's not the same as Greece, obviously. 25% said they will vote for a party like Syriza if such a party existed in Austria. You know how much there's a coalition now of the Socialist Party and the Christian Democrat, the Conservative Party, and they both get about 22-23% of the vote. So a party like Syriza will be there. What do people understand when they ask them this question? A party against austerity. They will be the first party in Austria. So I would say that the process is more general. But in some countries it has a more clear expression, in some countries it has a less clear expression. In Spain there is also polarization to the right. There's now a couple of parties, or 3 parties now, who are trying to capitalize on the right-wing vote that is being lost by a popular party, and they're doing quite well in their own terms.
I want to ask you about the right parties in Spain, because they are like Podemos but in the opposite, right? Like Vox, Syriza, because you didn't mention them, and I think that they are quite important because they are like following the same strategy that Podemos, like pt2 doesn't work anymore, but in the opposite, right?
Yeah, this is what I just mentioned now, that in Spain, I would say there's one party now really that's capitalizing it, which is Citizens, Ciudadanos. And this is a party that has a discourse against it's a populist demagogic discourse against corruption, and so on. And I wouldn't know how to describe the policies of Ciudadanos. I mean, they don't really have many policies. At bottom, they are racist. They're a bit like UKIP, perhaps, is one good comparison. But they see themselves as standing against establishment, against corruption, and so on. They're mainly capitalizing on votes that the Popular Party, the right-wing party, is losing. And yes, they're benefiting from being seen as a new party, so although they're not that new, I mean, they've been around for some time. There is certain experience of them, particularly in Catalonia. But they're benefiting from that. But they're also benefiting from the fact that the bourgeois media is giving them a lot of space because they fear the rise of Podemos more. They want to promote some other alternative to the existing parties. I would say they are also an expression of the crisis of the two-party system the bourgeois democracy was resting upon in Spain since 1978, but obviously not a nice expression of that crisis. I will say also that for the ruling class to put their trust in Ciudadanos rather than just promoting them in one election, they will have to send some people in because the current leaders and the composition of Ciudadanos is not very stable, homogeneous, or serious from the point of view of the ruling class. They can't really trust them. They're a bit, how should we say, maverick, mad, I would say. Vox is a more extreme right-wing party, more classical right-wing party, but it's much smaller from what I can see. And UPyD, which was bigger in the past, and tried to capture some of the center-right, center-left vote, not only from the Popular Party, but also from the Socialist Party, on issues like terrorism and corruption, but they've been also a bit discredited. So I will say that some of these parties can, that do not have a solid basis can rise and then disappear in a short period of time, which is, in my opinion, an expression of crisis and turbulence in bourgeois politics in general.
Just a little bit on the kind of development of the right wing kind of UKIP in the UK and the possibility of why it's developed here rather than the left wing. I think that one main key point to look at is the amount of austerity that we've received here in the UK, which is not nearly as large as you see in Greece or Spain. And I think what capitalists have managed to do is I mean, even Labour, Conservative, all place this huge media output on immigration, and you get this rise of the idea that actually immigration is a problem and that's causing financial difficulty within your country, which then gives UKIP votes. But obviously it's not immigration that's causing any of our economic problems. But what you don't have, like in Spain and Greece, is you don't have emigration from the country. So you can say, okay, well, this immigrants coming in, you haven't got this huge immigration, you can say, actually, this is the cause of it. I think that's why you get a right wing develop here, actually, because conditions aren't as bad as you've seen somewhere else. And obviously our economy is still strong enough that we still draw people in. I think that's why we still haven't really seen a left wing alternative, because when we look around at Europe, we go, actually, you know, it's not that bad here.
I would agree.
Yeah, about the same subject, about the rise of right. Actually, it's very complicated and difficult thing to answer. For sure, it's not only due to one reason or one cause. For sure, the absence of left, of an alternative, a left alternative is a major thing. But I would say that also a huge aspect that you need to examine is whether the country is economically strong and imperialistic force, a high imperialistic force, let's say. Meaning that countries that have the ability to get out of Eurozone and get out of Euro and stand in the world order, stand on their own or with the coalition that they already have, that are strong coalitions, etc., have the alternative to follow, or people are convinced that actually they have the ability to follow a nationalistic way in the world game. So for Greece, let's say, that is not a strong economy, it's never been, or a military force. This delusion is not there at all, or to some extent. I'm just saying that this might not be the major aspect that should be examined as well. The absence of the left is for sure the most important one. this about the rise of right in Europe. I want to say something more about Syriza.
About Syriza,
if you ask me, I'm a Marxist, I'm a communist. For sure, I find the program that Syriza is following is not radical, etc. But a critique that I usually do in far left, or people that think that they are far left, but actually by advocating advocating ideas that the masses are not ready to accept, end up doing nothing, like the Communist Party in Greece, which is actually doing nothing in practice, but advocating socialism and communism like pretty much like the church does about the paradise. You know? And advocating a super radical and super left idea doesn't make it more radical than people that actually are able to be involved with the masses and get them one step, only one small step further on. What I'm trying to say here is that actually the win of Syriza in Greece is not a win of Syriza. It's a win of all left people and communists that fought in Greece all these years and achieved this radicalization of the masses. And the way that Syriza has been advocated through the means, the public means, was like Syriza are the people that are wearing the black hoods and destroying the center of Athens, etc. But actually, this was not Syriza. This was anarchist and atarsia, let's say, at some point. But people voted for them. Voted for Syriza, even though they were hearing that actually those are the far radical and the far left and anti-systemic, etc. So it is a win of the people, of the communist and the far left people that actually achieved to radicalize so much masses in Greece. And within this process now, Syriza is playing a role of breaking some delusions. Let's say Syriza is saying that actually we can achieve all these measurements staying in Europe. The first thing that the mass will realize is that not all this cannot be achieved within capitalism, but all this cannot be achieved within Europe and Eurozone. This is the first thing that they will realize through this. Then it will come the isolation. If you get out of Euro and Eurozone without a transitional program with coalitions with other countries, and they realize that actually it's anti-capitalist transformation that is needed. But the first that they're going to realize is they need to get out of Euro and Eurozone. So, to the point that we, the communists, are able to create an alternative and another party that actually radicalize even more now the masses and gets them out of this delusion of Syriza, then Syriza itself as well have played a left role in the whole process of radicalization in Greece. What I'm trying to say is that actually we can argue against Syriza a lot and say what are the problems that it has, etc. But we never had delusions about Syriza in the first place to argue and feel betrayed. We knew that actually the program that they are advocating, that they are able to achieve, they will not be able to achieve within Europe. But to be fair against Syriza, because in Syriza there are many people that are actually communists as well, and not only in the INT, in the communist sector of Syriza. But there are many people that actually used to be in Atarsia, used to be in very decent, if you ask me, organizations and communist organizations. They are supporting Syriza, they are within Syriza now, they are supporting Syriza and they supporting it with a transitional program. The Thessaloniki program was not a program of Keynesian measurements, as I heard you saying. I think that it was more of a transitional program because it included nationalization of banks and nationalization of the basic means of production. So it was not just a Keynesian program of throwing some money to the public sector and making investments, etc. It was not just this. And having support by people that are very radical within Syria, I believe that actually the program was more of a transitional program. But there was a trap. It was not only that they have the illusions that they were able to fulfill this program within Europe. It was also that there has been a trap from the other governments and from the previous government against Syriza. Syriza was what is trying to do now is trying to gain some time until the election in Spain, so they will be able to have a bigger coalition of the north and be able with this coalition to counter-argue and counter-attack the Europe the Troika, let's say. So within all this time, what happened is that actually the previous government didn't, even if they were able to pay the debt in 6 months, they agreed with Troika to pay it in 2 months, just after the elections of Syriza. So that this government will not have enough time to make any transformations and fall directly from debts, etc. So I don't know where I want to end up with this. I just want to be fair against Syriza and put the whole picture there of this trap as well that has been built around. Yeah, that's all. Complicated stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with the idea of being fair and, you know, to Syriza and point out also that there were a lot of movements that kind of all merged and in support of Syriza, because they were seeing in Syriza like a radicalizing and a real alternative. But then at the same time, I think that as Syriza got closer, I think what you're saying is true, to the point that Syriza was not still thinking that it would have won the election. And as it got closer to the idea of, well, actually we are going to be in power and we will need to implement this transitional program that you're talking about, I think at that point the actual nature that is more reformist and more based on Keynesian policies came out, because its leadership is not necessarily is not communist, is not Marxist. There is a Marxist and communist part of Syriza, but it's not the majority. So I think that, I mean, as it got closer to the election, and Tsipras didn't really want to win the election in full, didn't really want to have this a full majority in the government, because politically they knew that they actually would not be able to implement the Thessaloniki program. The Thessaloniki program was the program to win the votes of the people, as the majority of the party do. And I wouldn't say that Syriza radicalized the people, but I would say that maybe it's the other way around. It's the people that actually radicalized the program of Syriza, and some people are actually more to the left than Syriza has ever been. So maybe it's, you know, the process is not so linear as I think you tried to explain, and definitely Tsipras didn't want to win a full majority. Wanted to be in a coalition, so that there's going to be someone to kind of be blamed also for not being able to go forward with the Thessaloniki program.
I'm not saying that actually.
No. I'm just saying that it's you know, I don't think it's they were going there with the transitional program, planning the way to socialist transformation in society. I don't think that was never the initial.
People were not to vote for communism.
No.
This is the only that will be able to vote the most radical that they could.
Yeah.
You know? So you go step by step, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
I think one of the points you made prior to the film Syriza was this, there's no alternative on the left, and that's the main reason why we haven't seen a rise in the left. But I think realistically, I mean, you could say that, but then Podemos, as we see, was only in January 2014, and when you have such a consensus kind of disillusionment with capitalism, you know, a left party will arise. Again, I don't think we have that. So I can't see that there's no alternative on the left, because there's many left parties in the UK. No.
In the UK?
Yeah. In the rest of Europe.
Yeah, this is one reason. I said that actually another reason is how high you are in the imperialistic chain. If you are used to go out and fight, as a country against terrorism, and then you are the one that fights against terrorism. You know, the ideology.
I didn't challenge that, because I think that's definitely correct.
Yeah.
But, I don't think it's not a problem of an alternative. I think the people create an alternative if there's a blatant problem with the capitalist system they're in. And it's not apparent enough in a lot of the Western European countries. So
But then on this point, I think no country could stay on the global, and for sure, for example, not even Britain could stay on the global market without Europe. I think when, for example, when the Tories say, oh yeah, we should have a referendum about coming out of Europe, they're actually going against the interest of the capital.
But the point is they tend to really do they?
Yeah,
the people believe that our economy is strong enough, and they give that idea dangling in front of them, but they'll never implement it.
And in some cases it is true. In some cases it is true as well. I mean, I was reading the news 2-3 days ago. It was this plan that has been discussed of bailing out, let's say, Spain and other countries, but leaving Greece aside, in order, to punish the left government and don't have the same outcome in Spain as well, the isolation. I mean,
yeah, giving an example.
Anybody else wants to say something?
I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's just a kind of question. I mean, in its only kind of like historical analogies with the Great Depression, what happened there, because I saw something about what happened in California with Upton Sinclair. So I don't know if you know a bit about where he got elected on quite a strong socialist program, and they were almost a kind of microcosm. They were kind of experiencing a similar kind of situation to what Greece had. They wanted to do things like take over factories, which are empty as well, and to start using them. And he faced a massive kind of electoral campaign at the start, like the modern press machine in America that started against that. And ultimately, he very nearly got elected in, but ultimately it was Roosevelt wouldn't give him the backing because he wanted to do the New Deal, an alternative. But I see there's a lot of sort of similarities in what I know about that. So what could potentially happen, but it's a bit of a more far left option to what's happening at the moment. But yeah, I guess maybe if you don't know about that specifically, it's not a question, it's like an observation.
If nobody wants to say anything else. Carl? I'll give 5 minutes to Jordan to speak.
Okay. Yeah.
Then we go to the pub afterwards.
You're
Keep
speaking.
the discussion.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it is a bit complicated because you cannot draw the conclusion from what's happened in Spain, for instance, that in any country the task is for a few people who have TB exposure to set up a party and then it will happen. I mean, different countries do have different national traditions. The masses have had different experience of going through this crisis in one way or another. There have been different struggles in different countries, and it's true there's a whole number of countries in the north of Europe where the dominant consciousness is still, this is bad, this is a really bad capitalist crisis, but at least we're not as bad as they are in Greece, Spain, Portugal, and so on, and this still kind of holds the thing together. But I will say that there is something deeper than these national characteristics, that there is a general trend. And the general trend is this, that even before this capitalist crisis started, a movement of questioning of capitalism had already started. Not necessarily amongst the masses, but amongst important sections of the youth. There might be people here who are old enough to remember the anti-capitalist movement, which started in Seattle in '99 with a big demonstration and spread throughout the world. And this affected not the masses in general, but a few thousand, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of young people who were instinctively opposing capitalism. And I would say that it was not only them. They reflected a deeper malaise in society, but that only expressed through that youth movement. It didn't have much of a continuity. But I would say that some of the people who are now in this current movement come from that, including the leaders of Podemos who were involved in the anti-globalization movement back in the early 2000s. There is a change, I would also like to make a couple of comments on what you said about Greece, Thanos, because there's some points that we need to be a bit more precise. One is in relation to the Communist Party. I agree with what you say, that the Communist Party stands in isolation by pretending or by formally standing for a socialist program, which I think is a step forward. The Communist Party did not stand for a socialist program. Just a few years ago, they stood for a kind of people's program. They didn't necessarily talk about the actual socialization of music production, and I think they've been pushed a bit to the left in their discourse.
No.
But I will say that. But we can discuss the details.
They have the same.
But what is true is that they stand in isolation. They say, okay, this is our program. But I will say that their program is also very much focused on the question of European Union. It's not exactly what they say, but you can interpret it in such a way that if we come out of the European Union, that's it. And that the main problem with Syriza is that they stand for the European Union. Well, this is not the main problem. And this is also, and there's an element of that also in the program of the left platform, which is the official left inside Syriza, where, for instance, you read, there's an article that Kostas Lapavitsas, representative of that school of thought, he published an article a couple of days ago, long interview, and he basically says, my program is we need to come out of the Eurozone in a negotiated way, because chaotic default will be worse, this is fair enough. We need to come out, and then what? And then implement the same program that Syriza is defending now, Keynesian program, because I do think it's a Keynesian program. If you actually read the Thessaloniki program, it doesn't talk about nationalization. The program in 2012 did talk about nationalization. The Thessaloniki program specifically talks of a new deal for Europe, 4 billion investment in the economy to create jobs, and it's a Keynesian program. It's not a transitional program because it's not linked to anything else. The way people interpret it or not is a different matter, but it's not linked to anything else, and it's linked to this idea that you can reactivate the economy by changing the policies. Right? And Kostas Lapavitsas, the left in Syriza, the left platform, they basically think, and Kostas Lapavitsas says it in very specific terms in this interview, he says, we come out of the Eurozone and then we implement this program of investment in the economy, restoring the minimum wage and all that stuff, and over a medium term then we introduce a program of industrialization of Greece. Nowhere in the whole interview he talks about, we have to finish, yeah? 1 minute. And nowhere in his whole program he talks about socialism or nationalization or breaking with the logic of private ownership of the means of production. But anyway,
don't worry about him. I think
going back to my last point, we can discuss the details of this. Syriza might think that the leaders of Syriza might think that they're gaining some time, and this is the way they're presenting it. But in reality, they're not gaining some time because of the following thing: because the leaders of Syriza have presented the 20th of February not as a necessary but bad compromise. They presented it as a victory. They said, we now can implement the reforms that we can choose where we cut, basically. And we'll cut a bit more here, we'll cut a bit less here. I mean, Tsipras and Varoufakis, they went to Parliament and said, this is a victory for the first time, the dignity of Greece, and we're going to decide, and blah, blah, no one's going to decide for us, the Troika's there. And this is fooling people. You might be forced to make a compromise. I mean, the Bolsheviks signed the Brest-Litovsk agreement, which was a rubbish agreement, but because they had nothing else to do. But they never said, oh, this is a victory. They said, this is what's been imposed on us because of the conditions, and we keep working for something else. So instead of preparing for a serious clash, or delaying a serious clash, they're putting themselves in a worse position to when the clash comes, because this can even be measured. At the time, 1 week after the Syriza government was elected, when Tsipras said we're going to implement our program in full, we're going to go this, that and the other, it seemed that they were serious and tough in the negotiations with Europe, they had support of 80%. In the first opinion poll, after the 20th of February agreement, support had gone down to, I think, 68% or 65%. So it's significant. People support Syriza more, the more radical and serious they are about implementing the program they voted for. So they're putting themselves in a worse position. But anyway, this is a specific point. The general point I wanted to make is this, that this is not a normal period. This is not a normal crisis of capitalism. is, I mean, for starters, it's already lasted 6 years. There's no way, there's no visualization that they're going to come out. Not only this, that the sectors of the world economy that kind of resisted this, like the BRIC economies and China, the BRIC economies are heavily dependent on China. China is slowing down its rate of growth very sharply. China has its own problems inbuilt in the model of development, which is massive state investment, which creates massive overproduction and massive debts which can be repaid based on massive export of their products. But where are they going to export their products? There's no markets in Europe or the United States anymore. So this is coming to an end. And they delayed it with massive state investment and so on. When it comes to a crunch, it will come to a serious crunch. So that's another sector of the world economy not out in the next period. They don't have a real way of creating a sustained development of capitalism. So basically, if you look at the history of capitalism, revolutionary waves do not happen all the time. It's obvious. I mean, people most of the times accept the situation as it is, as long as the situation is not too bad. But when the situation cannot be accepted anymore, then you have a revolutionary crisis. And you had one in after the First World War. You had one in the 1930s. You had one in the after the Second World War, immediately after the Second World War. Then you had one in the 1960s, 1970s. And we can discuss all of these revolutionary crises were defeated or derailed or co-opted in one way or another. But these were periods in which the whole edifice of bourgeois politics was shaken. People were looking for radical solutions, including in a country like Britain, including in a country like the United States. In the United States, you had the crisis in 1929. And then by 1933-34, you had the general strike in Minneapolis, the general strike in Toledo, the general strike in San Francisco, the formation of the Congress of Industrial Unions, millions of American workers organizing in very radical organizations and looking towards a revolutionary solution. We now live in one of those periods, but it seems that it's moving in a slower pace. I mean, these revolutionary situations were sorted out in the space of a few years. Say, the Spanish Revolution lasted from 1931 to 1937, approximately. And then it was over. Either one class smashed the other, or the whole situation was over. But now, in my opinion, it seems it's going to take a bit of a longer time, for two reasons. First, because the working class is now, in its specific weight in society, much stronger than it was in the 1930s in any European country. In the 1930s in Europe, there were masses of peasants, masses of petty bourgeois elements in the cities, and fascism could have a hold amongst these people. Now this is no longer the case. In no European country there is a significant section of petty bourgeois in the countryside or in the cities. And the working class is much stronger. The ruling class cannot smash the workers in the same way, in the way of physically destroying their organizations in any country. But at the same time, the leadership of the working class, the forces of Marxism, let's say, they are smaller than they were ever in any of these periods of time. That doesn't mean that they can't grow fast in these given conditions. But they're very small, they're very weak. And this is the main contradiction, I would say, between the needs of the objective situation, which can only leave room for fundamental transformation of society, and the weakness of the forces that advocate that perspective. We can only be patient. We can't shout louder than our own forces. We have to try to convince by participating in these movements. You can't criticize Podemos from outside and say, oh, well, you have a wrong program, your program will never be able to be put in practice. You have to participate, because there's millions of people who are looking towards Podemos, there are hundreds of thousands who are participating, and they want fundamental change. You have to participate with them, patiently explaining your point of view. But if you can't convince the majority, well, let's say, well, let's try this program, and then we'll see who's right and who's wrong. People learn through their own experience mainly, not through reading books or like people giving them lectures. And this is why, in my opinion, the fundamental task of the moment is to strengthen the Marxist tendency, yes, to participate in these movements, in the concrete struggles, the concrete political organizations that are being set up, but to do so defending patiently and in a manner that people can understand a Marxist revolutionary program. And I would say that Marxist revolutionary program might seem big words, but if you explain it in a simple way, basing yourself in the concrete experience of the people, can now be understood much better than any other time in the time that I've been involved in politics, and it's already quite a bit of time. So I will make an appeal to all of you who are not already members of the International Marxist Tendency, that if you are interested, let's open a discussion, and we want to win you over to these ideas. And you might be interested or not, but if you are interested, let's open this one. Thank you.